Hello everyone and welcome back to Dragalia Foundry, a fan channel where everything Dragalia Lost can be found. This video is going to contain my review of the latest Summon Showcase. It's a prize showcase, this time round featuring Grace, Bellina, Valentine's Hildegarde, Patia, Ramiel, and Gaibhne Creidhne. This has got to be one of the most stacked prize showcases we've ever had, and it's actually pretty tempting and a hard question on whether or not you should summon. So my personal advice on this showcase is going to be to summon if you don't have Patia. That's my heuristic for whether or not this is going to be worth it for you. I think that although a lot of the 5 stars here are tempting, everything is permanent. A lot of players who are newer to the game may have been re-rolling to get some of these characters already, and if you've been around for a while, you may have already picked them up and have them in your collection. So I think not having Patia is a good indicator that you're relatively new to the game, and a lot of these 5 stars would be positive hits for you. So that's my personal opinion on this. She's only a 4-star, meaning this is a good chance to pick her up. We don't see too many focused 4-star adventurers these days, but when they are at an appearance rate up, it is pretty easy to get them without having to break the bank using your entire summoning stash to pull on a showcase. So my view on this is go for Patia. She's a fantastic 4-star shadow adventurer. She's really defensive. She's good in a support role used in both co-op and solo play for lots of content. That's my opinion. And once you get her, I would probably continue summoning until you break up your pity rate and get a 5-star of some kind on this showcase, since there's a chance it could be Grace, Bellina, Valentine's Hildegarde, Ramiel, or Gaibhne Creidhne. Those all range from good to excellent. So I think that this is actually a rare showcase where a little bit of investment on it can go a long way. I don't think you want to go all out on the showcase unless you've been saving for a long time and really have avoided going for any of these meta influential adventurers and dragons for several months. Because I do think that we're headed into a Gala banner at the end of this month with a new Gala dragon who will likely be pretty good. Gala Jeanne d'Arc is what I'm thinking, Gala Reborn Jeanne. And looking ahead past that, we do have the 2.5-year anniversary. We might get a Monster Hunter revival for Rise's release. We might get Fire Emblem revival and new events later on. So I think that, as always, there are future lucrative banners you want to think about when you're summoning, and just coming off of the Persona collab, a lot of our stashes are going to be fairly drained right now. So that's my overall take on this showcase. I'd say it's worth it to go for Patia and maybe 1 5-star summon, but any more than that, and I'm not sure. I think you could easily end up spending more than you want to on this, and although it's tempting, and it's pretty cool to see we don't have just a straight up filler showcase like we often do between Gala remixes and Galas, I think that you may be better off saving and building up some resources for the next several weeks, since we finally have a little bit of a cooldown period from limited season starting in Dragon Yule and ending with the Persona collab. Alright, so as usual, I'll talk about the different things on this showcase, but since everything here is returning, I'm not going to go into as much detail on analyzing the kits and breaking everything down. One last thing I'll say about this showcase is that it is a prize showcase, so you might be tempted to summon for the possibility of getting lucrative and precious items as prizes as you summon. I do think that's a nice little cherry on top of an already good showcase, clearly packed with meta-impacting units and dragons, but I don't think the prize should be a reason to summon itself. The probability of getting the rare items in the prizes, you're going to see people who do get them, you're going to see those screenshots, you're going to be tempted, but at the end of the day, the chance is very low, so I don't think the prizes should tip the scales for you. It's nice that they're there on an already good showcase, but if all these adventures and dragons were bad from a gameplay standpoint, I would never suggest that the prize is the main reason you should pull. So I'm only suggesting you should pull because I do think the showcase is actually really stacked, and giving yourself a little bit of a chance on this, getting Patia is a pretty good thing to do. Alright, so as for the different adventures and dragons, let's start off with Grace. You've probably heard a lot about her by now, whether you're a new player or a returning player. She's a fantastic healer, and it's because her healing is unique. She actually doesn't heal reactively, she heals proactively by creating life shields, essentially an extra HP bar below each adventure on your team's HP, And the difference between that and their normal HP is since it's a shield, any attacks that they take, the damage is going to be prevented, they're not going to be knocked down, they're not going to be interrupted from their combos. So not only does this help you defensively a great deal, it also helps you on offense because your adventurers, your AI teammates can use their attacks unimpeded because when the attacks eat into the life shield, enemy attacks eat into the life shield, you're not getting knocked down, you're not losing SP generation, etc. So this is a really fantastic effect. Often moves that cause afflictions by dealing damage will also get blocked by this life shield, so that's really good. Basically, Grace, because of this life shield mechanic, is the queen of autoing and soloing, and even good in co-op since she is the only healer who doesn't rely upon restoring HP, which there are a few characters who like to stay at a low HP to deal as much damage as possible. She is uniquely suited to work with those characters, such as Bellina, who we'll take a look at in a second. Besides that, just an extra dimension to Grace is that she has this 4-strike co-ability. So there are several adventurers who use 4 strikes to deal increased damage, or most of their damage comes from their 4 strikes, and she's a good backliner for those types of characters. That's another thing that makes her stand out. And then finally, on her abilities, this Mournful Heart 2 is really the noteworthy one. It gives her infinite access to dispels through her 4 strikes. Her 4 strikes do take a while to charge up. They are on the slower side, but against Kaiyan specifically, when he puts up his shields, you need to dispel those, and you can't generate SP. You can't charge up your skills while he has that shield active. So having a dispel that's not tied to a skill use is great because it means you're never going to be stranded in a situation where you can't dispel him and you also can't charge up your skill that you might need to dispel him. So Grace is overall just a fantastic adventurer. I do think that she's a little bit overhyped at times. Like, I don't think that if you don't have Grace, you should feel daunted or feel like things are impossible for you. But I have to acknowledge she is a really nice quality of life character to have. If you're interested in autoing and soloing, it's going to make your life a lot easier. Eventually, you do reach a point after you farmed up several weapons and facility levels and dragon augments and so on, where I think you don't need Grace as much. I think I'm at that point now where only a few of my auto teams actually use Grace. Most of my other auto teams use other healers like Lowen, Halloween Lowen, Jiangxia, and Gala Zena. So I think you can get to that point, or even Hildegarde for Master Tartarus. But I would never suggest that it's easy. So I do think Grace will make your life a lot better in the early part of the end game, if that makes sense. So once you're starting to crack into some autos of like Expert Kaiyan, Grace is a huge pickup for that. But eventually, if you build out Lowen and some of these other healers like Expert Ciela, Expert Twins, that type of content, you don't need Grace to auto that. You can auto that reliably with other adventurers. All right, so moving on from Grace, now let's take a look at Bellina. Bellina is a character I'm pretty high on, which is kind of funny because I'm not a master Bellina player, apparently. In my Legend Kaiyan clears of both solo and co-op, y'all may have seen I was leaving Drive and Drive to 4-strike on the enemy. It turns out that's actually just worse than staying in Drag and Drive and button mashing with Bellina, making sure you stay within Drag and Drive but just spamming your first skill as much as possible. It turns out that's better to do, so I apologize for that mistake. But as for Bellina, I do think that she excels against Kaiyan. She kind of needs a Grace on the team to perform at her best, though. She is a character who relies upon being at low HP, and I think that she's become more replaceable with the advent of Joker, with Legend Kaiyan not requiring as much dispelling, and with other options that can dispel on command, much like she can, now existing on several characters, like Valentine's Hildegarde, since her Spiral also has that option. Grace, of course, has the dispel on command option. Bellina is still a strong adventurer, but she's really specifically geared for Master Kai and Legend Kai, and not particularly suited for other types of content. So I think she's a good character. Certainly love having her in my collection, and I use her frequently, but I can say that I don't think she's as crucial as Grace or as useful by any means. And if you already have Joker, I think that he's going to be able to do a lot of what Bellina can do for you. and even probably Gala Alex as well can do a lot of what Bellina can do for you, except those two characters fit into more comps because they can be run with a regular healer instead of just a Grace. Alright, so moving on from Bellina, here's Ramiel, so our first dragon. Ramiel is a good dragon because of his ability and his skill both. So his ability gives you 50% dragon gauge at the start of quest when he's max unbound. This works on helpers, so he's a really nice dragon if you're trying to help out your friends, but also for things like Mercedes Reckoning, putting Ramiel on a Grace is actually pretty popular to turbocharge your shapeshifting and make it so you can immediately transform with your lead character, often a Mim, Pipple, Zanefried. There's quite a variety of units that get used as the main character that want to be transforming into a dragon often. And the 60% strength is also nothing to scoff at. Marishi 10 is a limited Shadow Dragon whose only effect is the 60% strength and doesn't give any effect to Dragon Gauge, which is kind of sad by today's standards. So Ramiel is certainly a good dragon. There are also plenty of Shadow Adventurers like Durant, Delphi, that want a strength-oriented dragon compared to a skill damage-oriented dragon like Arsene, Cat Sith, or Shinobi. So there are a good amount of Shadow Adventurers who will like a dragon like this, and when in doubt on a support character, this is a pretty good role filler because you also get that extra 50% dragon gauge you can take advantage of. Angelic Declaration is also a nice skill here, reduces enemy defense by 20%, very sizable for 15 seconds, also deals shadow damage and inflicts poison, so that's going to enable your poison punishers. In the case of Gala Alex, your defense down punisher. That is pretty strong itself, and then unique to this, it actually immediately readies the user's second skill for use. So this is a way to turbocharge your second skill. Usually those are slower to charge up than your first skill, and then gradually fills the skill gauges of the user's first and second skill for 90 seconds. That's also pretty cool. Abilities that increase skill gauge fill rate will not affect this automatic increase. Alright, so that's some of what's featured here, and we haven't gotten to talk about Patia, Valentine's Hildegarde, or Gaibhne Creidhne, so let's head over to the showcase page, and I think on showcase info here we should be able to see info about them as well. Looks like it's not included here, so I'll just have to talk about them separately. Alright, so Valentine's Hildegarde, since she got her Mana Spiral, she is a really solid flame healer. She's not as abundant in terms of her healing as Halloween Lowen. She doesn't have access to the same max HP buff that he does that makes fighting with him on your team very cushiony and very safe. She's not going to be as good for double buff shenanigans as Halloween Lowen is because he provides defensive buffs. But Valentine's Hildegarde does increase team DPS by energizing your team. She also has Dispel on command via her Force Strike and can also debuff the enemy strength. She's a really solid flame healer that I don't think a lot of players have invested into just because you can get by with other flame healers, and for a long time, before her Mana Spiral, she was very unremarkable. But I do think that nowadays she's almost a preferred option for Legend of Volk if you know what you're up to in that. I personally use Verica for my solos these days because of her Dragon's Claw's Chain Co ability, but Valentine's Hildegarde would be my next best alternative. Alright, so moving on from her, let's talk about Patia, and then we'll move back up to Gaibhne Creidhne. Since it's so rare to have these 4 stars on a raid up these days, Patia is just a solid tank. She provides lots of defense buffs. After her Mana Spiral, those defense buffs come coupled with a strength buff built in. Really good for double buff strategies, very good for survival-oriented situations, and staple in Kaiyan. Because of the buffs that she provides, Azazel ends up being a really good dragon for her, but as a support character for whom most of her DPS comes from her team support, you could also throw on dragons like Ramiel on her if that's more your speed. I wouldn't say it's as good as Azazel, but it's also not the worst thing to do, and in solo, you're often constrained on how many dragons you have. You can even throw on Kachith on her because her skill damage is only in effect on her second skill, which causes bleed, and so that's something you're not going to use that often, so you're not going to use up the cat stacks very quickly, and it's going to increase your bleed damage. Patia is just a very solid adventurer, and at 4-star, she's a great adventurer to have. Her, Karina, and Templar Hope, I think, are a core of really good 4-star adventurers. Rounding them out would probably be Lowen and Pipple in the permanent pool, who are also quite good, and Halloween Lowen, who's limited, so you're not going to be able to summon him for a while. But I think that she is a good enough recent to summon on this showcase. And then finally, Gaibhne and Creidhne. Up here, Gaibhne and Creidhne, I recently put out a water dragon tier list video. I think this is one of the few dragons in Dragalia Lost I would consider an S+, just very good dragon on all sorts of adventures. Yes, this isn't going to be the absolute best in slot on every adventure, but the things that this dragon enables that no other dragons can do are many, and they revolve often around cheese comps, explosive damage, and also I would say that in water, this dragon can work on support characters. It's going to mean they can cast their skills more often. It can also work fine on DPS who rely on skills. There are some DPS characters like Yoshitsune, for example, that they don't even want to use their skills. Their DPS comes from their basic attacks. In rare situations like that, Gaibhne and Creidhne is not going to matter or be as good. But even for like a Zanefried, Gala Reborn Poseidon is sure a good dragon. But I think that having Gaibhne and Creidhne and spamming zones, when you think about team DPS, that actually might be better than Gala Reborn Poseidon, even if you sim the dragon damage. If your team DPS is high enough, skill recharge zones are just ridiculous for what they contribute. If you have like 3 other Karinas on your team, you could be a Gaibhne and Creidhne Zane and do pretty well for yourself, I think. So, long story short, I just think this is a really good dragon, and one that we have yet to see anything quite like this in the other elements. The only other dragons I think that are as good are not even in water. I think it's like Gala Mars and Gold Fafnir that are on the same level as Gaibhne and Creidhne. But that is going to do it for today, everyone. That's pretty much my take on this showcase. One last little note here. Be very careful if you're thinking about this Platinum showcase. It is paid only, but it's not just who they show in the picture. Every 5-star adventurer is eligible in the guaranteed summon, so your chance of getting any one of them is split among how many there are. So be very careful. It's not a coin flip between Bellina and Grace. You actually have the chance of getting any of these adventurers, so just be advised that with the Platinums, it is paid only and it's random who you get. So if that's okay with you, if you're cool with that, if you don't have a lot of Shadow Adventurers at all, then maybe it's worth it, but I think for most players, you'd rather just go for the regular old showcase here. Alright everyone, that is going to do it for today. Thank you as always for watching, take care, and I'll see you next time.